The police refuse to help. I'm just absolutely infuriated. So today, I'm going to take you out to the woodpile, do a little rant video. There's going to be a lot of people in the comment section that do not agree with this video, and I don't understand why folks will watch an off-grid channel and disagree with what I'm getting ready to say. But there are people who are so in love with the government or so numb to the idea that they will argue in the comment section and they won't even listen to what I'm saying or try to understand or comprehend or put it together. A while back, I told you that Carolyn is turning 62 next year, so she's got to get the Social Security paperwork rolling and all that. But our camper burned down a few years ago. Somebody burned it down, and all her birth certificate papers and, you know, all her identification was gone. Well, now she has to get it. So you have to have internet so you can research how to get your birth certificate. And once you get that information, I forget all the things that we got to have, but you got to fill out this form and you got to do all these things so you can get your birth certificate. But the first thing you got to have is a printer. Now, we live off-grid in a tiny house. So, first of all, running a printer just doesn't make sense for us, or having a printer. Now, before, we had modified sine wave, so a printer wouldn't even work on our modified sine wave inverter. Now we have true sine wave, so I guess we could get a printer, hook it up. But we would use it so infrequently that the ink would dry, and we'd always had to replace the ink. Now, I know all these people are going to tell me, oh, you can do this or you can do that. The thing is I don't want a printer. First of all, I'd have to have a place to store it in a tiny house. I don't have a place to store it. Now, think about this. I don't need a printer for anything else in my life, only for the government. The government requires that I own a printer. Oh no, Rob, and I got this in the comment section just nonstop the last time I talked about this. You can go to the library. Well, I said that in the video, sort of. I didn't mention library, but I can go somewhere to get things printed. But that means I have to have a car. That means I got to drive. That means I got to spend money on documents that they want me to fill out for money that is owed to Carolyn. It's Carolyn's money. I know. Well, we got to make sure that she is really Carolyn so she can get her money back. Well, why do we even have the program anyways? Social Security, ridiculous. You don't hardly get any of your money back. Do you realize if you'd have saved the money that you paid into Social Security, the money you could have invested, put away, would have had 100-time return over Social Security. But, you know, we have to pay into it because that's the law. But I shouldn't have to do any of it. They require you to own these things, internet, computer. And the thing is you'll spend days and hours trying to figure all this out. Now, I know there's experts out there that know every inch of everything about Social Security and all the government regulations. Tax is another one that absolutely infuriates me. Here's the logic of taxes. Income taxes. I work to pay the government. Now, I understand we need to be able to pay taxes. That's our civic duty. We have to do it. What I don't understand is we hire people, IRS agents, IRS people, accountants, whatever you call them, so we can send them money, and their only job is to verify and count the money we sent them. So we're paying people to count our money. How does this even make sense? And then, if you don't do it right, then they come out and audit you and tell you didn't do it right and you got to pay more interest and penalties. So organizations have developed out of this nightmare that the government has created for us. So now they have H&R Block. So now you have to go to H&R Block and pay people to file taxes so you can pay the government so they can count your money. So now I got to pay someone to do the paperwork so I can send it into the government so they can do the same thing that the H&R Block just did. Or, you know, Tax Pro, or, you know, whatever accounting software you got. You gotta rent that, you gotta buy it. It's just bureaucracy at its best. When you're self-employed, I think the IRS becomes a bigger thorn in people's sides than when you just pay from your paycheck. You don't even really notice it missing, I guess. But I've been self-employed most of my life. And I know all these experts out there are gonna tell me, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. The IRS doesn't do that. You gotta do this and that and this and that. When you're self-employed, you have to pay more than everybody else. I've done it all my life. I've hired experts. I've hired accountants. I know what I'm talking about when they say you pay your Social Security as self-employed, you have to pay 15% where everybody else pays 7%, 7.5% actually. What it is if you work for an organization, you pay the 7.5%, and then the organization pays the other 7.5%, so that equals 15% of your wages are being paid. But then the company can write off the 7.5% that they paid. So it's a write-off. They write off on their taxes your Social Security payment. Well, when you're self-employed, you got to pay the full 15% with no write-offs. Now, you can become incorporated or partnership, or there's all kinds of things you can do. Limited liability, I don't remember all the things. As a small business owner, is it really worth it? So I run a YouTube channel. My YouTube videos sometimes do good, sometimes don't. Last year, I had a terrible time with my videos, so I didn't make a lot of money. But the year before, I had one video that spiked up really high. And so if you're not smart, if you're not careful with YouTube, you can really get trapped in the taxes, especially with the 15% that you got to pay. Now imagine this. You're 18 years old, you just made your first video and it went viral and you made bukus of money. And then you think, wow, I'm rich. And you go out and buy a new house and a new car. And now you got to pay taxes. It is a trap being a content creator. So a couple years ago, I had a video that did really well. It made bukus. Well, then you think, well, I should be able to pay the taxes next year with my regular paycheck, because you have to pay quarterly. Well, if you don't make as good money this year as you did last year, if you spent that money for some reason, investment into your business, then you're struggling to pay the quarterly tax. I think you can get it reassessed and all that, but it's just more nightmare. And this is where people will struggle. They will argue how important it is that I pay taxes, and I'm not arguing that at all. I'm arguing with the bureaucracy of it all. It's a mess, and it just keeps getting messier. Every time we send a group of people to Washington, they just keep making it messier. So today, I wanted to get my license renewed for my pickup truck. They're supposed to send out a form. Now I know people are going to tell me all the things I need to do. Well, I didn't get a form. So I go online and I try to find out when they're supposed to send me the form. I can't find any information. But they say, hey, you can fill it out online. So I get all my paperwork together. And I spend 3 hours trying to figure out how to fill this thing out online. Eventually, the program tells me that I'm going to have to call and they'll do it for me. So I try to call the number that they tell me to call, and it's an hour-long wait. Well, I've already been doing this for 3 hours, so now I got to do it for another hour. But in the message, in the recorded message, it told me that I could call my local license office, and they should be able to help me. So I call my local license office, and I ask, hey, when are they supposed to send out that paper? Oh, they're supposed to send it out a month before your license are expired, which it's already, they should have already sent it out. And I said, well, I didn't get it. Well, that's a courtesy. They don't have to do that. So again, I pay people to do something that they don't have to do. It's your responsibility to take care of your licensing issues on your own. Except you are supposed to have this piece of paper if you want to do it online. That way I wouldn't have gotten this message saying, oh, no, you can't do it online. I know somebody's going to say, oh, yeah, you can. No, you can't. So I asked the lady, can I do it over the phone with you? Oh, no, you got to come in. So I spent 3 hours plus the phone call to find out I should have just went in the first place this morning. I have some probably controversial views when it comes to police officers. I understand the importance of having police officers in our society, but I also think that police officers sometimes become bullies. I was a scrawny kid. I weighed 109 pounds in my senior year. I ran cross country and track. I ran distance running. And of course, the football players, they were just always bullying me. I mean, it was okay, I'm not crying about it. I made it through, and I'm not distraught and want the world to pay for my suffering. That's not the point I'm trying to make here, but they were bullies. I'm a stronger person today for it. However, what I noticed was all the people who bullied me became police officers. I find that kind of interesting that the bullies become police officers. And if you really think about the psychology of it, it kind of makes sense. You get to put a badge on, and then you get to boss people around and order them around, and if there's a bad guy, they can throw him to the ground. And it just kind of makes sense how that mentality would turn into a police officer. So I kind of have that love-hate relationship. I understand their importance in society, but I also think maybe we should do better screenings and different things. I don't know. Like I said, it's pretty controversial, my thinking on this. Actually, my best friend in high school, who was a football player and in 8th grade did bully me. We patched things up somehow later and became pretty good friends, but he became a police officer also. So it was just kind of interesting how that worked out. I've always considered police officers, they like to pick on law-abiding citizens. The old couple driving down the road, 6 or 7 miles, a little too fast, let's pull them over, because they know the old couple isn't going to cause a problem and they can make a little bit of revenue off the old couple for speeding. But then when there's a crime, they don't want anything to do with it. Oh man, I might get hurt. I want to be able to go home tonight. And I know what I'm getting ready to say is controversial, but there are other people who have seen this happen where they just will not approach a bad deal. So back in the 1970s in Washington, D.C., there was 3 women who lived in a house, flats or something. It was a 3-story building. And there were roommates. Now, one woman had children, and she lived on the 2nd floor, and 2 of the women lived on the 3rd floor. Well, one day, the 2 women on the 3rd floor hear the woman on the 2nd floor screaming. You can Google this. This is a terrifying story, but something that you need to be aware of. What had happened was 2 men had entered into the 2nd floor and was assaulting this woman. I'm not going to get into the details. I read this probably 20 years ago in a magazine, and I could hardly read it. It was so disturbing. So the women upstairs called 911, and that's what it says in Wikipedia, 911. I didn't know they had 911 back in the 70s, but that's what Wikipedia said. We can all rely on them to tell us the truth. So they go out onto the porch roof. They get out on the window and onto the porch roof, and they're waiting for the police. And they see one of the officers drive by, but doesn't stop, doesn't get out of the car, doesn't do anything. Now, I may not get all the details correct on this. I'm doing the best I can, but like I said, you can look this up. So another police officer comes by, knocks on the door, doesn't get a response, and leaves. So then they called 911 again and said, hey, the police keep showing up and leaving. They don't do anything. There's something going on downstairs. The 911 operator assures the women that police are on the way. So a few minutes later, they hear another noise downstairs. They figure it's the police. They're in her. So they make themselves known. Hey, we're upstairs. Well, the police weren't in the house. It was the 2 men who were being violent to that woman. So for the next 14 hours, they assaulted those women in their home, forcing them to do all kinds of just terrible things. So the women sued. District Court of Washington, D.C. or something, I don't know. They sued, saying that the police had an obligation to protect them. Well, they didn't. The court, by I think a 4-3 decision, said that the police have a responsibility for public safety, not individual safety. So you as an individual are not part of the public, but they can, I guess, control traffic just fine. So as I've said many times before, my life is pretty easy. I don't have too much stress. I don't have a gas bill. I don't have to take care of anything other than the chickens and Carolyn. That's it. That's all I got to do. Except a few times a year, I got to deal with government. We really need to figure out in this society how to downsize it. It's out of hand. So if you click this up next box, it'll take you to a video where I was talking about eggs. So if I can inspire you to live free, get away from government so you can live your dreams.